Hi, I'm Michael with Southwest Landscape Services, and we're going to talk about the irrigation controller and a little bit about the irrigation system. So there are 37 zones on the system. They pretty much start in the very far southeast corner of the property and work their way counterclockwise around for the most part. You kind of jump and move around, but you'll be able to see one zone to the next if you start in that front corner. If you wanted to do a manual run through and just see if there are any leaks, see if there's everything's working properly, you would click the controller here to where it says manual operation. There are several options, so you can either start a whole program or you can just do a single zone. I'll show you as if we were wanting to start a whole program, and so you have the arrow pointing on manual program, you hit the plus sign, and now it's basically ready to start with zone 1. If we turn it to run, it would start. Right now we have a test going on outside, so that's why it shows 19 was running, but zone 1 would kick on, and then it will run through the whole 20 minutes before advancing to the next zone. So if you needed to skip faster than that, you would come hit this over arrow, it would skip to zone 2, and so on and so forth. If you just needed to see one zone run by itself, you would come to the same screen here, the same area on the dial, click it down to manual station, hit the plus sign, and now you can choose whatever zone it is that you need to see run. So you use the right and left arrows to choose the zone, and then the up and down arrows to add time to the zone. Oh, sorry, actually the plus and minus to add time. These are the minutes and the hours, so right now it would be 1 minute, 5 minutes, so however long you need to see it, have it run to be able to walk out to the zone to actually see what's going on. Once you have all this set where you want it to be, you just click the dial up to run and it will come on the zone that you chose. As far as just the general programming, if you lose power, there is an internal battery that can saves the settings for weeks. It's not enough power to actually run the system, so the power does have to be on for the valves to actually operate, but it will save all of the internal settings. If you ever do need to reset the day, time, all of that information, so you just turn to this dial here, what would be 1 o'clock, set current date, so whatever's blinking is what is available to change. So right now it would be the year, you just use the plus and minus to change, the over arrow, so there's the month, the day of the month, AM, PM, or 24-hour, the hour, the minutes, and then once you're back to the year, you've cycled through them all. Program start time. So this is what time the whole system kicks on and goes sequentially through the different zones. You can have multiple programs, so in a situation like this, some of these zones or the properties are so big, you can't necessarily water the whole property at one time. So you would maybe set the front area on program A, the back area on program B, and they would water kind of independently of each other. You can have multiple start times. So right now, because we have a lot of fresh plants, fresh grass, we are coming on more than once a day. So right now this shows that the first time it comes on is at 5 in the afternoon. So if we wanted to change that, you can use it, just changes in 15-minute increments. You just use the plus and the minus to change that. If we hit this over arrow, so actually they only have one start time on program A. If we wanted an extra one, here's where we would add that on. In order to take a program off is basically in between 11:45 p.m. and midnight. So once you see that where there's no numbers, that means you've essentially turned that start time off. This controller has the ability to have 8 different start times on each program. So you could have, I think there's program A, program B, C, and D. So 4 times 8, I mean, you could have a lot of start times if you wanted. So the station, so that's what time the whole thing cooks on. To differentiate how long each individual zone comes on, that's where you would come here to set station run times. So right now station 1 is running for 20 minutes. We can add more or decrease using these plus and minus buttons. The right or left gets us to the different zones. Now as far as we will have a list of what zones do what. Rotor zones, typically we run for 30 to 45 minutes, depending on the area they're in, how much shade it gets, and depending on the time of the year. In the middle of the hot part of the summer, we run each one of those zones. One rotor zone can run for 45 minutes to an hour. In the cooler fall and winter, they can run for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, just depending on how green you want the grass. Spray zones are closer to 10-minute run times, kind of at the max. They apply the water very quickly. The rotors kind of have to go back and forth, so they're not putting water out in all areas constantly. The spray heads, they're smaller, but they do water faster because they don't have to make passes and go back and forth. So that's why they have a third of the run time, because they apply the water so much faster. There are bubbler zones on the trees. So that would be, so if you ever, and obviously it'll be marked bubbler, they don't really, there's not a lot of visual. When you turn that zone on, the water stays very close to the tree, so it's not as easy to see when that zone's running as a spray zone or a rotor zone. But if you ever needed to add or decrease time on just one particular station, you would do so here on the set station run times. To tell it what days we want it to turn on, you would come to set days to water. And so right now it's watering every day, because we have new plant material we're trying to get established. So say right now we just wanted to turn Friday off. So you'd use the down arrow, work your way down to Friday and hit the minus. Once there is no check mark, that means that day is no longer going to be running. If we want to add Friday back on, you just get to whatever day that you're wanting to adjust. The plus sign turns the zone back on, minus turns the day off. So that's basically how you would control that. Seasonal adjustment here. So this, with this feature, we can actually set the controller to automatically decrease the times itself, so that no one has to come and do that manually. So we would keep it at 100% probably from June, July, August, maybe even into September. From October, November, December, we can gradually start lowering the percentage. And what the percentage does, so right now we're at 100%, if we just dropped it to 50%, it would basically cut those run times in half. So if you drop it to 70%, it cuts down a quarter of the run time. So it basically it has nothing to do with the amount of water being put down. It's only how long the zone runs, and that's how we control the amount of water being put down. Set pump operation, we do have a pump on the system, so this does always need to be in an on position. If it's in off, the system will still run, but only with the very low pressure that is coming through the meter. So heads will still pop on, but not operate as they should. So we do need that pump to stay on and running to get the proper distance that we need.
It's a way that if the pump fail, you're gonna know it from seeing that panel, or how you gonna know if the pump is not working?
It depends. If there is a wiring problem with the pump, then it probably will send you a fault.
Okay.
Here, these little green dots, when something's running, I'll kick on a zone. So when a zone is running, you have a green dot here.
Okay.
If it ever has a red dot here, generally it will tell you what zone that was in. If it ever says P/MV, that's the pump or the master valve, and that is the main wiring that is going bad.
Perfect.
If the pump just burns up, it won't necessarily know, because the only way it would actually know is the electricity.
Okay.
So if the electricity is still going, just the pump can't turn on because it's broken, then this wouldn't tell you that. You would just have to go, you'd have to see that we don't have pressure.
Exactly.
Going here.
So the way, if you notice some low pressure getting out of those heads, you should check your pump to see if it's actually working.
So basically, if you ever have low pressure, if you turn on zone 1 and you notice they're not looking like they should, first thing that I would do is basically just do a quick drive around the property to check to make sure we don't have a leak. If there is a leak, there will be a lot of water, pooling and coming up out of the ground, because that could be a loss of pressure if a fitting breaks or there's a break in the pipe. If you don't see any semblance or any clues of a leak, then I would go and check and see if the pump is coming on. You can hear it, as long as this is in the on position and the zone is supposed to be running, you would hear the pump running outside. And I'll show you, where all that pump and all that assembly is. One very important thing is that, which I don't really know how it would ever come about, but we cannot have the controller come on without a zone being in operation. So really the only way that would be the case, so we only have 37 zones, but the controller can go up to 40. If somebody was to come and actually turn on manual station and turn on zone 40, what that would do is operate the pump without turning on a zone. And so the pump would be running, and the water wouldn't have anywhere to go. So that would be really bad if it ran for 30 minutes to an hour that way. The pump would burn up. So as long as whoever knows, not to ever servicing it, knows to only turn on the zones that are listed on the map, nothing higher. And we will put that in writing on the zone map to, do not turn on zones for, the extra zones as they're. So we'll operate the pump without any place for the water to go. You do have kind of all the basic instructions that I've gone through are here written on the inside of the controller. So you do have something to look at if you do need to make a change. There are more advanced features. Obviously, you can go online to hunter.com, put in the iCore controller, and you'd be able to access, tutorials and anything if you ever needed to go further in depth with the controller. But most of the general programming, most of what you're going to need to do is right here on the inside of the door.
Okay.
The system does have a rain freeze sensor. So this is the receiver part of it. The actual sensor is mounted outside. And it will send a signal. There's basically, the sensor has sponges inside. As they get wet from rain, they click down on a sensor and let this know not to rain, or not to water. If it was wet right now, this light would be red instead of green. You can bypass it, so say somebody needs to run through the system, but it rained earlier, and so it's not operational. You would hold down, there's a button here. And then the sticker's only important for when you first turn the system on. So there's a bypass button here. If you hold it down, that red light means that the sensor is no longer working. So it will let the system run even in the rain. So if that light is ever on, you do need to hold this back down, and you hold it down a few seconds to turn that back off. You also have the same ability right here on the controller. So right now it's bypassed because we don't want the controller, since we're establishing plant material, we don't want a heavy morning dew to stop the system from running. We rely on that water right now. So when it's active, the sensor is watching the sensor and letting it control it. If you click it to bypass, even if it's raining, the controller will still run.
Okay.
That's.
What is that transmitter that you have?
This does not come with the controller. This is what we're using right now to go around. It's basically a remote control.
Okay,
so we have another unit outside that we can turn zones on, turn them off as we're going.
But at the end of the day, that's yours to keep.
At the end of the day, this will not be on.
Okay.
It will be basically just like this.
Okay. Okay. So basically, that's for you to give maintenance and setting all the system now. Okay.
Yes. It makes it a lot better than having to run back in here to advance each.
But in the future, if the property manager wants to have that, they can actually buy that.
Purchase one. Yes.
Yeah, separately.
It would work on this control. Any other Hunter controllers on properties they work on any controller. It's not just something that you program to this particular one.
Cool.
It works with any Hunter controller.
Okay. And then you're gonna also add, you said, a layout, basically like a zone map with all the zones.
Yes, and that was actually what I was in the process of doing before we started.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll know exactly where zone 1 is. It'll be color coded.
Cool.
It'll be very obvious where water's with what.
Okay.
If there ever is a leak, so there is something, a zone's running and a head got cut off by the lawnmower and water's shooting everywhere, basically all you would have to do to stop that from running is click the system to off. And so this will, once you turn it to off, it will shut off the individual zone valve, and it will also turn off the pump. Now the pump does still have the city pressure running through it. It's at a much lower pressure, but so if there's ever a situation where the controller says off, but there is still a zone continuing to run, then there is a problem, a mechanical problem inside of that valve. And at that point, you would have to shut the water off, take the valve apart, get whatever debris or replace parts in the valve to get that to stop.
Perfect.
Each valve does have an isolation valve, so a manual ball valve. So you can also always, so that you don't have to, say you do realize we have a leaking valve, rather than having to leave the entire property not watering, you can just turn that ball valve off that's directly behind the valve with the problem, and everything else can come back on and water as normal.
Okay. And those valve locations are going to also be shown in your...
Be shown on the as-built.
Okay.
Correct. One thing that would be important though, if that was the case, anytime we ever close a ball valve, that time so say we had a problem on zone 10. So we've turned the ball valve off so that everything else can keep running because maybe somebody can't get out for a week. But it is imperative that we come over to zone 10 and remove the time. And so that there's 0 time on it.
Okay.
Because what we don't want to have happen is the controller is trying to water zone 10 with that valve closed. The pump is running with nowhere for the water to go. That will...
They're just putting pressure on that valve that is closed.
Yes. So it's either going to break the main line open because there's too much...
The water is going to try to get out somewhere else.
Or it's going to do back pressure on the valve, on the pump. Either way, it would not be good. So if there's ever any zone that is isolated with the isolation valve, it must be unprogrammed in the controller as well. That's pretty much the general gist of it.
And then
obviously there is a battery inside, so worst case scenario, you can always unplug the controller. That will turn everything off as well. Once you plug it back in, it won't just kick back on to what it was doing. You can unplug it, wait 10 seconds, plug it back in, and whatever zone was running won't be running anymore.
And then in any emergency, we have your contact label right there.
Yes.
For them to know.
But generally, all you have to do is just switch it over to off. The system will no longer come on until it is clicked back on to run.
Perfect. Thank you very much.